Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the DC chapter of the National Railway Historical Society's Zoom presentations. We've got a wonderful show for you today, and that will be with Mike Yuhas, who is a member of the Wisconsin chapter, as well as a board director of the National Railway Historical Society. Within the DC chapter of the National Railway Historical Society, we have a number of programs to help us promote our science and education process for railroads, as well as our focus on preserving the history of our Pullman car, the Dover Harbor. We sponsor a rail camp, high schooler, to the National Railway Historical Society's annual rail camp. And if you were able to get the timetable from this month of November, you read two wonderful articles about some rail campers, and it makes a really good opportunity for young people. So I'm going to put a pitch in here. If you know a young person in high school, please think about mentioning the rail camp to them and apply for the scholarship when we get the details about that, which will come in the spring's issues of the timetable. We have the Martin Memorial Railroad Library at Bowie Tower, and we have our historic 100-year-old Pullman car, the Dover Harbor. And tonight, we have a great opportunity to hear from a fantastic photographer who's going to take us to new heights as we rail fans want to take our railway photography in a different direction. So Mike, it's over to you. Go ahead and start the program.
Well, thank you, Ann. I appreciate the invitation to be here tonight. Between you and Jim and Garen, thank you for everything. Thank you for everything you do for the DC NRHS chapter. And yeah, it's delightful to be here. I am speaking to you today from the western shore of Wisconsin, along the Mississippi River, which is just outside my window, in a little town called Trempealeau, Wisconsin. Well, I guess we'll just get started on this thing here right about now. So, Ann, if you would show me your thumb, if you see a kind of a teal thing there.
I see it.
Okay, good. Well, we're here. So this is a quote. You can quote me on this. Elevation is good. I don't know who said that, but it seems to fit. When we talk about drones, this is one thing that you can get using an aircraft to move your camera up in the sky is elevation. I see my friend Steve Glashinsky is in the audience here tonight. He had a poor man's drone for several years in the day before drones became sort of readily available. He had a long pole and a wonder pole, and he was able to mount his camera on top of this pole that was telescoping and extensible. And he got the best shots because he was far above everybody else. Today, you can do this with a drone. So we'll get started. Here's my little thing here. It's drone-based railroad photography. I'm Mike Yuhas, and you're attending the Washington, D.C. chapter of the NRHS meeting on November 8th, and I'm glad you're here. So you can't have a program without an About Me page. And so I'm going to give you a little background on myself. I have had a lifelong fascination with trains. I'm sure most of you have as well, and flight as well. And it's interesting. I remember as a child growing up, occasionally waking up from a sound sleep having a vivid dream, and oftentimes in my dream I would be flying, and it was just a really neat kind of experience because I got to see things that mere mortals could not see. I felt like a bird. And when I'd wake up in the morning, I'd be, I had these visions in my mind of the railroad tracks from above. And I always wondered why my arms were sore in the morning when I woke up. I had these weird dreams. Um, so, like most every person who's interested in trains, I got interested in model railroading first because it was like a cool thing to do. But I eventually realized that's not for me. I have nothing but the utmost respect for my friends and colleagues who are model railroaders, but I ain't one of them. I'm really only particularly interested in one-to-one scale stuff, real railroads. Um, I'm involved with photography. I've dabbled in video, but mostly my workflow centers around still photography. I have been a railroad photographer since 1972. That's 52 years. That's an inordinately long time. And interestingly, this is the first railroad photo that I ever took. It's in my hometown of Port Jefferson on Long Island. It's an Alco FA power car leading a train out of town. And I would have had to have been a freshman in high school at that point. And I actually have a picture that shows you what I looked like as a freshman in high school. That was me back in 1972. And today I look something like this. So it goes. So I acquired my first aerial photography platform or drone in 2017. I was really hesitant to buy one because I knew I was just going to crash the thing, and it was going to be $800 or $900 out the window. And but I ended up getting one from a friend who his estate, unfortunately, he passed away before he even used the drone. And I gave them a lowball offer, and I said, make sure if you get a better offer, make sure you take it. I won't feel bad. Well, they took my offer, and I ended up with my first drone, and there's no looking back. My career was I was the ad sales guy at trains and classic trains at Kalmbach Media. I was there for over 30 years. I retired in April of 2020, right at the height of COVID. I couldn't have a going away party. I felt kind of gypped, but we all remember how serious COVID was. And as bad as that was, I know a lot of people who didn't fare as well. So I count my blessing that I was able to get out of there in one piece. So I am the past president of the Wisconsin chapter of the NRHS. And as Ann mentioned, I am now a director of the national NRHS and happy to be a volunteer on many committees with the NRHS, as Jim mentioned privately earlier. So, and I do have a website, and it is mikeyuhas.org. I'd be delighted if you would go and visit. There are, I think, 7,000 or so railroad photos on it. If you ever need time to waste, or if you ever have insomnia, just go straight there. So what are we talking about here when we talk about drones? Well, short answer is not this. This is a Reaper, an Air Force Reaper. Price tag on this, when I looked it up a few years ago, was $32 million. That's probably higher now. And these can fly long distance missions, and us mortals cannot, and we don't want to do stuff like that. And it has some ordnance on it as well. No, this is a photo of the first drone I had. It was a DJI Phantom 3 Standard. The stripped down version of it was $500. And as I say, I ended up getting one from a friend's estate. and it served me really well. It got me, it was the bug that bit me. Then I upgraded to a Phantom 4 Pro a year or so later. And then, and then I got a Mini 2, which was released in November of 2020. And I wanted this just as a backup. I actually had to send my big Phantom 4 Pro in for service, but I couldn't be without a drone. And these were reasonably priced. The camera in it is not as good as the camera that was in the Phantom 4 Pro at the time, but for the price, it was well worth it. And I still have that in my arsenal. But today, I am using a DJI Air 3 that I've had for a little over a year. I bought the thing the day it was released and got it the next day, and I've been so pleased with it. It actually has two cameras in it. Most drones up until this point, there were some exceptions, but many drones only had one lens. And generally, it was a fairly wide angle lens. And this has one of those, but it also has a mild telephoto lens, equivalent to a 70 millimeter lens if you're thinking in 35 millimeter terms. So that's my progression of aircraft over the years. Talk a little bit about basics of flight, just to kind of get us grounded. I hope not in the subject here. Aircraft, fixed wing or helicopters, those sorts of things. They're controlled along three axes. The lateral axis, which is the wingtip to wingtip, is your pitch. So if you think of the line, the imaginary line going through the wing, and then when you point the aircraft upward or pointed downwards, that's pitching up or pitching down. The longitudinal axis, the front to back axis, if you turn on that axis, that's your roll, and that helps you make turns, bank into turns while you're on a fixed wing aircraft. And finally, the vertical axis, which is up and down, top to bottom, and that's your yaw. That's your turning. And I'm going to just pause the share here because I have a very high-tech model aircraft that I'd like to show that to. So again, pitch goes up and down like this. Roll is sideways, not that much. Sideways, like this, and yaw is turning it right or left, port or starboard. Visual aid, just bought it just for this presentation. So I'll get back into the sharing thing here, and on to the next slide. So drones, most of them are known as quadcopters. Quad because there's 4 propellers, and they're independently controlled. And the really neat thing is, using your remote control, you only have 2 sticks, one to go up and down and turn it one direction or another, and the other one to go forward and backward or sideways. That's really cool. You don't have to worry about controlling each individual propeller, which would be really crazy if you did. These quadcopters can hover in place. And the really neat thing is, it's almost like a tripod sitting up in the sky. Or they can fly at speeds of around 40 miles an hour, sometimes more if you got the wind at your back. And it's always used in conjunction with a remote control. I'll show you. I'll stop the share again so I can show you the typical remote control. This is the remote control for the DJI Air 3, and it beeps, and it'll go through its powering up cycle. But this is actually what connects to the drone. These are the 2 sticks. There's some other controls on here, like for your shutter and stuff like that, for your aperture and whatnot. This is going to have a hard time because it's not going to find my drone to connect with. But when it is connected, you're basically looking through, you have a viewport from the drone, and it's mirrored right here on your screen. So you are looking at what the drone is seeing. So it makes photographic compositions really, really easy and very, very precise as well. So that's a quadcopter, hover in place, used in conjunction with a controller, and the pilot, that would be me, can see what the drone sees. To me, this is nothing but magic, and it's fantastic the amount of technology that's packaged into one of those small little machines. So that's all about a quadcopter. Now, here's a schematic view. Again, I mentioned it's 4 propellers. They are counter-rotating. So your A and C propellers are rotating clockwise, and your blue propellers are rotating anti-clockwise. And that keeps the thing from spinning out of control. And if they're all running at the same speed, the drone will just be hovering there. As I say, each prop is controlled independently, but it's not for the operator to do. It's all done with the electronics and through that thing called magic. So a quadcopter can adjust its altitude, its height, by applying equal thrust to all 4 rotors. So if you want to go up, you just give it a little bit more juice. And if you want to drift down, you little less juice. And its yaw, the way it turns, can be adjusted by applying more thrust to the rotors rotating in one direction and less on the opposite, depending on which way you want to go. And then you can also adjust your pitch and roll, but in practice that isn't done because the idea is to keep the drone at level flight. So now mounted underneath the drone is a gimbal that has your camera. That little tiny little thing there behind the round lens is the camera. Now this is an old photo. This is a Phantom drone. So this is a sort of a little older version, but it's basically the same sort of things. It uses a gimbal. It supports the camera, and it has 3 motors. There's a yaw motor, which is not used all that often because, frankly, you're usually just pointing the drone where you want it to look. For fine tuning, in case the thing gets buffeted around by winds, there is a yaw motor that can help do some minor fine tuning corrections. The roll motor, same thing. If your drone happens to be out of level, the camera will always see level. And there's the pitch, which is frequently used if you want to look up or look down. Those are the 3 axes in the gimbal. The really neat thing is there's motion sensors on board the drone. Again, magic that talk with the gimbal that always keep the thing level. Again, it's just a pretty amazing feat of technology. So that's a little bit about. You know what? Let me just hold this here for a second, and I'm going to show you another actual real visual aid here. This is the drone. This is the Air 3. This is my Air 3. You see now it has 2 cameras in the gimbal. This is the gimbal. You see it's very, very supple the way it works. There's lots of range of motion in it. A little bit of yaw, but again, most of the time we're aiming the drone where we want it to go. 4 propellers, and they actually fold up when you're not using the thing. When you're transporting it, they fold up like such, and there you have it. Of course, these all fold in neatly when you have the time to do it right. But there you go. That's a DJI Phantom, Air 3. So back to the screen share here again. And once again, drone basics. So first and foremost, we like to say fly safely. We're going to get into flight safety here in a moment. You've heard the terms UAV, UAS, SUAS and drone. Um, it's unmanned aerial vehicle or unmanned aerial system or small unmanned aerial system or drone. They basically all refer to the same thing. Um, sometimes I call them unarmed because, well, for the most part they are. But it's not an SUV. It's a UAS. Um, One of the things you're going to need is on your phone, you're going to need an essential app such as Aloft Air Control, which keeps you in touch with temporary flight restrictions that may be in your area to fly. And of course, in the DC area, there's a lot of no-fly zones, so you're going to want to go out further afield. We'll get into that in a minute. Lance authorization is required for flight in controlled airspace where available. Some controlled airspace you're not allowed to fly in at all. But Lance stands for Low Altitude Authorization and Notification Capability. It's an automated program with the FAA. And I told you about the air control app. That's how you administer it for yourself. A background on licensing. If you are a hobbyist and doing it only for fun, that's what I do, there is no license required. There is no drone license required. But you must pass the recreational UAS safety test, which is acronymed as TRUST. If you are flying commercially, in other words, if you're taking pictures for your friend, the realtor, to sell the house that he just listed, or if you're helping your friend, the roofer, do inspections of roofs after hail damage, you can't do it as a hobby, even though you may not be getting paid for it. You have to be flying under the Part 107 rules. You have to be certificated to fly commercially, and that's a long process. I fly as a hobbyist because my intention is never to sell my photos. In any case, any drone weighing 250 grams or more, that's a little over half a pound, must be registered. And drones themselves are pretty light, but once you stick a battery in there, it's like a brick. And so that adds some weight. So I was showing you that mini drone, the Mini 2 that I have, that weighs 249 grams. So it does not have to be registered, but this Air 3 does. And this is a sample of a drone registration. This is mine. I've had it since April of 2017, and it expires on the 2026. Interesting thing here, it's only like about a $5 renewal fee, and I think it lasts for. It may have gone up. It lasts for a couple of years. Now, I was telling you about air control. This is a kind of an essential app. I'm going to stop this share and I'm going to start a different share if I can do that now. And I'm going to bring up my iPhone and okay, so we are connecting to my phone. I'm going to show you how the air control app works. So this is my phone, and in my UAS folder here, air control. This brings up a map of the area that you're in. And as you see here, I'm right on the Mississippi River in a town called Trempealeau, Wisconsin. And there are no restrictions. Let's see if I can make this go up. Yeah. Let's fly. There are no advisories in the area. It's safe to fly. Now, however, if there were a restriction, I'm going to go down the road here to La Crosse, Wisconsin. You see this, let's see, it's hard to zoom in and out when I'm mirroring on my computer here. But one of the places I like to fly is right in here. It's hard to see it on this map, but right at the bottom of French Island, there is a railroad track that comes across through here and across the river, across the Mississippi River at La Crescent, Wisconsin. And you can get one of these Lance authorizations to fly in this area at no more than 100 feet above ground level. And that's all done through this app here. And I'm going to stop that share and go back to my presentation because I'll show you what that actually, what that output looks like. This shows you one day I tried to fly and I couldn't because there was a temporary flight restriction. This was 4 years ago. The Democratic National Convention was in Milwaukee, and I wanted to fly in this area, but flights were prohibited. And it showed up right on the app. You could not fly here. So I thought, okay, well, it's a beautiful sunny day. I do want to fly and get some train pictures. You see, I was right on the edge of this 30-mile radius of no fly zone. So I just went outside the radius. That, again, that shows you where the ground zero was, where you couldn't fly. So I went a little west of Oconomowoc to this place near Sugar Island on the Union Pacific, and I saw that I was able to fly there. And as luck had it, there was an actual train coming, so I was able to get this shot. Again, because I was using the air control app to see where it was safe to fly and where not. So that's just a little background. A little background on how you can fly and where you can fly and when you can fly. Here's another Lance authorization from just a couple months ago. Jim and Ann were with me the day that I did this. This was I flew my drone at the NRHS National Convention in August, and this was in Middletown, Pennsylvania. On the Middletown and Hummelstown, and they were doing some street running, and I thought, by golly, we really need to get some aerial shots looking down at all the convention attendees taking their pictures of the street running. And I know you can't read that little map there, so here it is enlarged a little bit. Well, this shows you this is actual my authorized low altitude Lance authorization. So it shows you where the Carnes grocery store is, and it shows you that I got it automatically approved for the sort of almost the rectangle, the polygon here. This I never exceeded the bounds of this rectangle because I couldn't legally anyway. That's for sure. But this allowed me to take pictures. Go back one here. This is in reference to airport MDT. It's within the Class C airspace. And it's beyond the scope of this discussion to talk about all the various different types of airspaces. But the airport code for the Harrisburg Airport is MDT because it's actually in Middletown, Pennsylvania. A little aircraft trivia for you there. And this allowed me to get shots like this. See, they were running their S6 up and down the street, and I'm flying basically below treetop height here. I'm flying below the wires. I find that you really don't have to go really, really high to get really great shots. But the really neat thing is there was a lot of convention delegates there, but there were also, just regular people, people coming and going from Cuppy's Diner, and some kids in the back bed of that pickup truck on the lower left there that were just enthralled by the street running that were not involved with the convention. But it was a fun day. So here are the guidelines for unlicensed recreational flyers, and this is as promoted by the FAA. So you fly only for recreational purposes. That's for your own personal enjoyment. So I have a website that has hundreds of drone photos on it. I do it for my own enjoyment. I don't do it for anybody else. If you like them, hey, that's great, but I'm not making any money from it. This is all personally, strictly a personal endeavor. So the FAA says you have to follow the safety guidelines of a recognized community-based organization. What does that mean? Well, like for instance, the Academy of Model Aeronautics is one of the few FAA recognized CBOs, and they're all about flying safely. It's an organization that mostly deals with RC aircraft and so forth, but a lot of the lessons that you apply to radio controlled aircraft also apply with drones, UASs. Keep your drone within the visual line of sight, or if you can't, if you're too busy looking at your controller, have somebody standing next to you that can keep an eye on your drone at all times. And somebody that can tell you you're getting too close to that tree or whatever. Give way to and do not interfere with other aircraft. So if there's a Cessna in the area, you get out of their way. They don't want to smash you, and your drone would end up worse for wear. Always fly at or below the FAA authorized altitudes in Class B, C, and D airspace, and only with prior authorization using that Lance, as we showed you before, when you're flying near airports. When you're in uncontrolled airspace, you can fly up to 400 feet, and you don't need any prior authorization. And that is the FAA's rule here. FAA has preemption. If a municipality tells you you cannot fly above me, well, yes, you can, because it's the FAA. They have sole jurisdiction of the nation's airspace. Now, the local jurisdiction may prohibit you from landing or taking off in a particular area. That's totally within their rights. So you got to be careful about that. We'll talk about that later. FAA says you have to take the recreational UAS safety test. Trust and keep proof of that on your person while you're flying. And then have your registration marked on your, well, first of all, have it registered, and then have it marked on your drone, just in case you run into an FAA inspector. I did once, and it was interesting. It was an interesting chat. Maybe we'll talk about that later. And then finally, do not operate your drone in a manner that endangers the safety of the national airspace system. So, in other words, don't be ridiculous with it. There's a lot of temporary flight restrictions. You'll find them in the air control app. That includes basically any sporting event. You don't want to be flying your drone because it's a prohibited area. Now, after doing this for a few years, I have some of my own accumulated wisdom. Some found through real kind of challenging circumstances. But first and foremost, maintain situational awareness at all times. Always know what's going on around you and around your aircraft. Always, always, always. And be respectful of property owners and others on the ground. So you don't want to be buzzing people or buzzing people's houses, because they can get cranky. They can shoot your drone, which is totally illegal for them to do. But you don't want to go there. You don't want to be that guy. Always be aware of local restrictions for takeoff and landing. As I mentioned before, the FAA has complete and sole control of the nation's airspace. But when you're on the ground taking off or landing, municipalities can have some restrictions. So you want to be aware of that. And then I'm also going to say keep current with the FAA regulations and requirements, because they do change. I've been through a lot of changes in the few years that I've been doing this, and it's kind of hard to keep up with this stuff. So I think the pace of those level of changes has come down a little bit, but still be aware. And that all goes to maintaining situational awareness. So here's a fly safely example, one where I didn't. And so my buddies out here on the CN train, they were recrewing. I wanted to take some pictures from a slightly different angle, and I flew backwards. And on my original drone, it didn't have any collision avoidance systems, so I ended up in a tree. And if you look closely, you see a couple of lights blinking in the tree, and it was stuck up there for a while. I actually ran the video camera while the drone was stuck in the tree. You see the railroad track going kind of top to bottom there. So the drone was really cockeye for this, but that was kind of embarrassing. We did eventually recover the drone and the footage, but yeah, fly safely. The aerial platform, the drones bring an entirely new perspective to your photography. If you're a photographer and you're used to being on the ground, you can get an entirely new perspective by being elevated a few feet. I'm going to give you a couple of sort of examples of some terrestrial-based versus some drone-based photos. So Chris Gus took this picture, this series of pictures, two pictures. This is the St. Mary's River Railroad in Idaho. This great shot, couple of Jeeps passing a dilapidated old barn. Looks really neat, a lot of neat character to this picture. But when he took the drone up, he got a whole nother extra bit of perspective in his photo. Yeah, there's the dilapidated barn about ready to fall down, but look at the mountains in the background, a silo. You got a lot going on in this picture that you didn't have in the wedgie from down below. Here's another Chris Gus shot on the MRL east of Thompson Falls, Montana. It's really a fantastic shot as it is. You see some mountains in the background, and you see some low clouds on the hills in the background there. But when you put the drone up, look at the wild, wonderful change of perspective. The river there just totally glass-like, and you see that actually is just a thinned ribbon of clouds up against the hills there. Fantastic photo with the drone, and I thank Chris for letting me use these pictures in this presentation. My friend Amanda McCarthy took some pictures of a move on Reading and Northern a few years ago when they were still transporting heat exchangers. This is in Whitehaven, Pennsylvania, crossing a river up there. And this high and wide move, just a single locomotive, just a single load on this. Pretty impressive, right? But her husband, Dan, was flying the drone, and you can actually see the whole move in its context. So it's a very large heat exchanger, very huge, overtopping a couple of different cars there. And of course, you see all the scenery just crossing the river here in Whitehaven. So before we get into some of my example photos, I want to talk a little bit about the aesthetics. I've been a photographer for a long time. You know, we all know about the rule of thirds and all the various rules of photography that you should apply. Well, they all apply to drone photography as well. So I have some tips for aesthetics. Now, first of all, you are authorized in uncontrolled airspace to fly 400 feet from ground level. And you do get some really great shots from that height, but I would say use that tool sparingly. Most of the shots that I take are at like treetop height, or maybe even a little bit lower, but just enough to get you a little bit higher than you would get from when you're on the ground. So that's one thing. Now I'm going to show you a couple of examples where I am up pretty high, but they're rare. Most of the pictures I'm hovering around 100 feet or less. So And then when using your drone, don't waste your shot on something that could easily be seen at ground level. Um, use it where it's going to make a difference in your photography. Find locations that ground-based mortals like I used to be just haven't seen. And one of the really neat things you can do is you get onto your favorite mapping program and do an aerial. They call it a satellite view. It's actually using photos taken from airplanes. But when you go out and explore a railroad line with like Google Maps, you can see where the streams are and all the rivers that you may not know about, the creeks. And usually there's a bridge over these water features, and they add a little bit of depth to your railroad photography if you can incorporate those into your pictures from time to time. And finally, I always say, include sky in your photos. And that gives the viewer a sense of placement. It gives them a horizon. It just usually so much more pleasing when you incorporate sky in your photos. So fly on the sunny side of the tracks. Okay, same as when you're taking pictures on the ground, you want to get the sun behind you. Same with using a drone, unless the sunny side is the one that's cluttered with utility poles. You want to avoid those. Again, maintain situational awareness. Many drones, including the ones I used up until now, have a wider angle lens, which means you're going to have to get closer to the train if you're going to see any detail in it. So just be aware of that. But because you're closer to the train, you're going to need a much faster shutter speed to be able to freeze the motion of the train to to minimize motion blur. If that's what you wanted your final image. So this is where I get to bore the living daylights out of you with some of my own photography taken over the last couple of years. This is up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, on the Delaware Lackawanna, with a C420 painted in Lehigh Valley colors. Love Alcos, really neat place up there. In 2018, I started doing a lot of photography around Milwaukee when the weather got good. And here's a shot of a Canadian Pacific oil train going underneath the Union Pacific in Wauwatosa. And since I was there for the CP, I figured I might as well stick around for a UP train as well, and got treated to a fresh out of the paint shop locomotive. Neat stuff. On the on the CP at Reeseville, Wisconsin, this is a marsh. It's between Watertown and Columbus, Wisconsin. And it's a low-lying area. And in wintertime, if there's a lot of rain, this area can flood. Two trains racing in and out of the yard at Fond du Lac, intermodals in each direction. This photo was actually featured in the calendar published by TTX one year. I like to include props in photos whenever possible. Again, there's a water feature there. We're crossing the Rock River in Horicon, Wisconsin. This is a grain train just being made up in Horicon. But there's this this dilapidated, I think, out of service smokestack, and you can fly up there and incorporate that in your photos. I've done that a few times. Crossing another branch of the Rock River near Theresa, Wisconsin on CN. One of my favorite spots. This I like because of the waves. It was a breezy day on the shores of Lake Michigan at Manitowoc, and that's the local job running with the GP9 that day, going past Manitowoc Public Utility. They bring in Coke for fuel, and then they burn it and they contribute to the grid that way. A couple of days later, up near Ladysmith, Wisconsin, on the line, the former line that used to go across Wisconsin, the what is it? The Bradley sub, Steve? I believe that's what it is. It's basically out of service. Just there are 1 or 2 trains across this bridge a week. Took the drone up when the Sioux Line 1003 was running on a Santa special. Here's that Reeseville Marsh in a high water situation. They cleared Amtrak to go through here at 25 miles an hour because they could apparently see the top of the rail. But it was a snowmelt and warm and rainy, and that's why we ended up with all this water in the marsh. On the Transcon single track section in Oklahoma, brand new GEs coming down the hill into Fond du Lac northbound, Byron. And Union Pacific local crossing the Milwaukee River. See, I like to get water features in a lot of my pictures whenever possible. Here's another smokestack from the Borden's plant. Used to be a dairy of some sort in Plymouth, I believe. I think it's just a cold storage now. Union Pacific Big Boy went across Wisconsin. Naturally, I had to get a picture of it. And this was a sight to behold, I got to tell you. I was so glad I had the opportunity to see this. And then the next day, it overnighted this night in Milwaukee. And the next day I saw it leaving over that same bridge over the CP in Wauwatosa. The water tower at Kleiman, on the Kleiman subdivision, a small little branch that goes down to Jefferson, Wisconsin. And a coaling tower at Kleiman Junction, same train, a few minutes later. Water tower at Lomira on the CN. It was a beautiful, crisp fall afternoon for this photo in October of 2019. And at Duplainville, Wisconsin, which is a railfan gathering place. And you see there's a bunch of railfans in this picture to watch this westbound CP train. Wisconsin and Southern train, their tank cars going into storage. This again was right during the COVID when things were in sort of a weird situation. Well, Wisconsin and Southern took the car storage revenue, so they were just running this to the end of their line. This is in Niles, Michigan, very close to the Niles Depot, an Amtrak train. Watertown, Wisconsin, so named because I think of the river that goes through there, the Rock River. And this is along the banks of the Mississippi at near Maiden Rock, Wisconsin, with a westbound train. So I took this picture and I showed it to my wife. And now my wife, she's a sport. She's ridden Amtrak with me, but she doesn't get the trains thing. She doesn't usually go with me when I take my pictures. She lets me do my thing, and that's okay because she has her thing that she likes to do. But I showed her this picture and I said, I'm kind of proud of myself. This is kind of a neat picture with the scenery and stuff. And she was enthralled because she's hadn't really spent any time out in the western part of Wisconsin. And she says, that looks beautiful. I said, well, you should come with me sometime. Well, she did. Like the next week, we went for a drive out to western Wisconsin. And wouldn't you know, we found a house out here. And that's what I'm in right now. Crazy, crazy thing. On the Santa Fe near Hinda, Illinois, over the Spoon River. This is another shot on the former Santa Fe, now known as the Southern Transcon in BNSF. They run a lot of intermodal there, and they run them really fast. Up in Marquette, Michigan. This is the LS&I, Lake Superior and Nishpeming. They are dumping taconite pellets into the loading dock at Marquette. And another kind of perspective that you would never see without the drone. That's Lake Superior in the background. And another job is on duty, and they're running around their train or switching over to a different track down below, while this guy's shoving the taconite loads onto the loading platform. Now, I was back there a little bit later, a month or two later, and I actually didn't see a train on the pier, but I did see a lake boat being loaded with taconite pellets at Marquette. So that was a kind of a neat experience. A little closer to you guys, this is on the CSX on the Keystone subdivision. This is Mance, basically coming down Sandpatch Grade, an eastbound train. And at Havre de Grace, Perryville on the other side of the Susquehanna River there, where it dumps into the Chesapeake Bay. I got lucky and I saw a NS coal train during midday on the Northeast Corridor, crossing the Susquehanna. So that was kind of cool. And that same day, I got lucky and saw a CSX train crossing its bridge over the Susquehanna River. This is the largest bridge, the longest single bridge on the B&O system. I think you know that. And talk about big bridges. This is a single track bridge on the Santa Fe, just east of Kansas City. One of the hot intermodals going east at Orick, Missouri, crossing the Missouri River. It's a wide river, but not very deep. You could almost walk across it, I think. Our chapter sponsored a trip on the East Troy Electric Railroad. And this is my fellow chapter members getting their pictures, but I got a different perspective. The RCP&E at New Ulm, Minnesota. And another one of my things is I take pictures of boats. Here's another lake boat. This is the Alpena, the SS Alpena in Milwaukee, Milwaukee Harbor on the 9th of November of 2021. It's one of the very few, perhaps the last steamship that's in regular service as built on the lakes. And it's in the cement and salt trade running across from Saginaw and down to Chicago, to Milwaukee, and so forth. But it's backing into its berth at Milwaukee, going past the sewage plant there. Up the road from me here at Nelson, Wisconsin, this is the Chippewa River, where it dumps into the Mississippi. And I can talk about the geology and geography here for a long time. It would bore you to tears, but this is one of the shots that I took at a very high height. This may be close to 400 feet high, but again, for this one, you really need it to get an overall view of everything and the massive amount of sand and all the tannins in the water in the river. It's a neat shot, I think. Another one of my favorite places is Kingman Canyon. I've been out there a couple of times. It's just enthralling. If you ever saw the movie Cars, part of it was like set right in here. It's an animated movie, but you recognize like the rocks and the rock formations back in through there. But it's just so awesome to see an intermodal train as typical BNSF practice, 5 units, and not going slow. A little further east of there at Truxton, this gives you a sense of what this engineering is involved with this BNSF. They call it a natural crossover at Truxton, and usually before this was in service, trains would have to cross over from one track to another based on the grades, which way they were going. And this has saved enormous numbers of hours of delay that they used to have to take waiting at a switch or at a crossover to cross from one track to the other, because they're separated based on grades there. But this just does it for them automatically, and they just breeze right through. Down the river here in Lynxville, Wisconsin, on a chilly dusk in January. The frozen Mississippi at Trempealeau, Wisconsin. That's where I'm at right now, in Trempealeau. More C-420s on the Arkansas and Missouri. This is at a NRHS fall conference 2 years ago on the A&M. Another one of my favorite boats, it's the SS Badger. It's a steam-powered ferry that crosses between Manitowoc and Ludington during the season. Formerly owned by the C&O, and it used to be a car ferry that would bring box cars and stuff back and forth. But it's now just used for automobiles and foot passengers. Really big-ass bridge over the Ohio River at Sciotaville, Ohio, on, I believe, the former C&O. And I believe that's the N&W down at the lower left corner. We're near Portsmouth, Ohio. On Long Island, on the Long Island Railroad, on the Greenport branch, the main line. Now I took this, I was at the Bridgeview Bed and Breakfast, and it has this wonderful view of the Rockville Bridge. That's why they call it the Bridgeview. And I've stayed there a few times. I know the proprietor, Keith, and so forth. And got up this morning and they said, hey, the Central Georgia unit is coming through. I said, well, that's really cool. And everybody was out there on the deck waiting to get pictures. And they knew it was getting close, but this other train came out of Enola Yard, the one with the shiny GE on the point, that ruined everybody's pictures except mine, because I had the drone, because I was able to fly almost all the way across the river to get the one train overtaking the other. This is near La Crosse, basically La Crosse. This is French Island, the township of Campbell, Wisconsin. This is a CP local train crossing over the Black River, and 5 boats tied up for the winter from my friends at the Riverview Tug Service. These are assist tugs that help barges help tows into the locks. There's a series of locks and dams on the upper Mississippi. And you see, we're just starting to get a skim of ice here in December of 22. Fast forward to the next month up in Trempealeau again. Frozen Mississippi, it's all frozen. And we just had a nice little snowfall and the trees all look flocked. One of my favorite shots. A couple of months later, on the line that runs from Winona, Wisconsin, on up into Lewistown and Rochester, Minnesota. CP runs 1 or 2 trains up through here a day, and you never know when, but I happen to be lucky and being led by a NS unit, the 1111 SD70. But you can't get this shot any other way than with the drone. And then later that day, they actually ran a second train up, and again through, you see all the bluffs in this little canyon. And if you look at the top, you see fields, farmers' fields. So it's kind of neat that the erosion over many millennia carved this little canyon or a coulee into the earth there. Of course, all feeding into the Mississippi River. And I see your picture in there. Am I getting long in the tooth here?
Well, we are getting to our ending time.
Okay.
And so
I'll just have a few more here.
So I'd like to sort of find out if people can hang with us for another 5-10 minutes. So go ahead. And I have 2 questions for you once you're finished. Okay, perfect. Well, again, I'll do these quickly. This is the drawbridge at Sebula over the Mississippi River on the CP. This is the NRHS convention in August of 2000 or September of 2023
on the U.S. Sugar Railroad near Clewiston, Florida. We see we have the photo line. Of course, I got the drone up above everybody. Some fall foliage here in Trempealeau. Beaumont, Wisconsin, or Beaumont, Texas, earlier this year. I've been around. In Pepin, Wisconsin, just up the road here a ways. This is one of my luckiest shots because we have four things moving in this picture. Two trains, an eastbound and a westbound on the BNSF, a couple of different intermodal trains. And then we have two tows, one going westbound, the New Dawn, and then a light boat going eastbound, or actually southbound, the William Hank. This is at Clinton, Illinois, on the former Chicago Northwestern. I take pictures of barges. This is one of the largest ones I've ever seen. This is crossing under the UP Bridge at Thebes, Illinois, with 30 barges. Just gigantic amount of commerce. You might have seen this picture before. Emory, Utah, this past June. American Falls, Idaho, the following day. Cook, Washington, on the BNSF Fallbridge sub westbound train along the Columbia River. And then I got a multimodal shot here. So this BNSF train in the foreground is the train we just saw, but in the background there's a tow, a Tidewater tow, heading toward the west with some grain and so forth. And on the other side of the river, over in Oregon, is a UP train. And in the foreground, I'm sitting in my Jeep Renegade on Highway 14 there, I think it is, shooting the drone picture. So that's kind of a neat shot. On the former Montana Rail Link, I got really lucky in this one in June. I got Union Pacific's clean engine in the coal mines area of Douglas. This is crossing the new bridge, new Kate Shelley Bridge on the former Chicago Northwestern. See, they replaced the spindly old iron one or steel one and left the tracks intact, just cut over the new bridge. And this is on my way to the NRHS convention. This is crossing the Ohio River at Monaca, Pennsylvania. And this is at the NRHS convention with a trio of RDCs on a run-by going past the West Cressona station. And my final picture taken today at noon, this train here, eastbound on the BNSF at Trempealeau, Wisconsin. And that, as they say, is that. So you have some questions for me, Ann?
I certainly do. I have two questions for you. One from Donna about in the trains in the show that you've just showed us. Most trains are really long, and she's asking about the general topography in Wisconsin and for the railroads. And is there any grades necessitating multiple power units?
Yes. Typically, so out my window here is the Mississippi River, and so that's all at a kind of a water level. There's a small grade, but it is minimal. BNSF runs an awful lot of its trains with DPUs. So we have a locomotive or two or three at the front, and oftentimes one or two in the back. Elsewhere in Wisconsin, same sort of thing. When you have some really long trains, they tend to run them with multiple locomotives.
Okay.
Hope that answers Donna's question.
Okay, thank you. The one question that we had from your trip to the tree, if you will. And then you showed a picture in Montauk that showed wind on the lake. And
In Manitowoc, yeah. Mhm.
so my question, it relates to any tips for, because when you go out, you're not always going out in sunny weather.
Well,
And the weather could turn bad. And any tips for wind and other weather-related flying?
the drones do remarkably well in kind of windy situations. Now, I wouldn't take it out in hurricane or gale force winds, but in a nice stiff breeze, it's amazing how well they do. Um, it's just whatever you feel comfortable with. I would say, fly into the wind first to see that you can. It's a lot easier to come back with the wind behind you, in case you run out of battery power or what have you. But the other thing that you'd want to avoid is flying in the rain. That happened to me the other day. I launched the drone. It was cloudy, and went to take some pictures of a tow here on the Mississippi River, and it started raining. And drones and water they don't really mix. I told you earlier that I bought my Mini 2 as a backup because I had to send my one drone in for service. It's because it got wet and it needed some service. So that can be expensive.
Okay. Okay. Well, I really appreciate it. We're running a little bit long, and I will just close a little bit and answer a question in the process. The all of our Zoom sessions can be found on the DC NRHS YouTube channel. And we've done almost 3 years of Zoom sessions. And if you've got ideas for Zoom sessions, Garen and I were planning for 2025 the other day, and we're thinking of doing 5 or so Zoom sessions in 2025. So if you liked this session and you have ideas, please send them to me at editor@dcnrhs.org. That's editor@dcnrhs.org. I'm the editor of the timetable, and if you can't remember that, just grab a copy of the timetable, and all of our contact information is in there. And I have to say, thank you so much, Mike, for a really wonderful and informative session. I hope that everybody enjoyed it. I certainly did. And we are very appreciative for the work that you've done with the Wisconsin chapter, with our national organization, and thank you for sharing your information with us in the DC chapter.
Thank you again for having me in.
You're welcome. And with that, I'm going to open for a short chat if people want to open and have a few moments chatting with Mike or among themselves. But that was a great show, and I hope that people learned a lot.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mike.
Any comments from anybody on the phone? Well, let me just ask. I'm going to embarrass somebody here. So, hey, Joey, I know that you're a Zoom, I know that you're a drone flyer on occasion. Any questions you have for Mike or anything that you might want to share?
That was really neat. Thank you. That was a great thing. That was a great show to see. I don't think I really have any questions. That was really cool.
Thank you, Joey. Are you into trains too, or?
A little, I guess. I don't know.
He's more into drones.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, it certainly has just changed my approach to railroad photography, like I say, I've been doing it for a really long time, and I don't really consider myself necessarily a great photographer, but one who likes to get out and document the railroad scene. And by launching the drone a little bit above treetops, you're getting shots that up until this point nobody ever did.
So let me embarrass another person. John Cowgill, I know that you're out there all the time taking images. Anything that you've learned from today's discussion?
Nothing in particular, but I like the views and I don't do drone photography myself, but it could be something I can get into, maybe if it's. Of course, most of mine is done in the DC area where there's restricted airspace, but then getting away from DC would be a different story.
It sure is. And if you're anything like me, I was really apprehensive about getting into this. It was something that I always wanted to do, but I just knew I was going to crash the thing too much, and it was just going to be a money sink. But the great thing is, over the past few years, there's more and more collision avoidance. Like these little eyes, these are actually helping you avoid a tree. Same thing with in the back as well. So I'm not going to say you can never crash into something, because you potentially certainly can, but it's just a lot more difficult to do that now, which is a great thing. The other thing is DJI, which is this is not a commercial for them or anything, but they're sort of the recognized leader in drones in consumer level and higher, and made in China. And there's, a lot of discussion as to whether we want our data going to China. I don't know that it does, but they have made it very easy. The engineering that they put into the drones today is just phenomenal. That includes imaging, and that includes collision avoidance. And then the programs that they have where you can do it's like an insurance policy, but it's a minimal amount that you spend, and they'll replace your drone if you smash it into a house, or if it flies away uncontrollably. That happened more so in the past than it does now. It's good. It's good peace of mind to have. I haven't had to use it, and I'm happy about that.
So the photos that you take in the drone, do they reside in the drone? Do you have to bring the drone home to download your images?
So right here at the back of the drone, there's a little port. There's a USB-C there, and also there's a little mini SD. So they're all on here, and then of course I'll put them directly onto the computer, where I will catalog them, keep the good ones, throw away a lot of bad ones.
So how much
Pixels are cheap.
How much airtime do you typically fly when you're taking any of these particular shots?
You have limited battery life. Although I'll say this on this, this is a fairly large battery. I'll show you. Just pops out like this, and it's like a brick. The typical battery life with this drone is about 40 minutes.
Ooh,
Yeah,
that's more than I expected.
They've improved over the years. It used to be 12, 15 minutes. then you had to be really careful you don't launch until you know your train is almost there. But now you can be a little bit more leisurely about it. And if you have a couple of spare batteries, you can basically do almost a day's worth of shooting with the batteries that you have on hand.
So the mini SD is your rate limiting factor if you have multiple batteries?
The SD card?
Yes.
You lost me on that, and
I mean, does it run out of space before you run out of batteries?
no. It's like a 256 gigabyte card.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It's amazing how many of them cards can hold so much information.
Exactly. And they're tiny. They're tinier than your pinky fingernail.
Yeah.
But typically you can get about 40 minutes or so with a battery. And that as you use it, that will decrease a little bit, but I've been using this for over a year and haven't seen any signs of degradation yet.
Okay. So if we're going to get one of these, we're going to be flying safe, follow the FAA rules, get licensed if you have that need because of the weight, and get registered, get your drone registered if it's above the poundage, and make sure that when you fly, you're flying safe and that you're aware of your environments, and that you know what your drone can do, because you mentioned some drones are okay in some kind of weather, but they're not all okay in that kind of weather. You need to kind of know what your conditions are that when you fly your drone
yes. Yeah. The less expensive drones, but it's just like everything else in this world. You get what you pay for. And some people are under the they have a school that they think that you want to learn how to fly on a really cheap drone, because when you crash it, it's not that big of a deal. And that may have been true back in the day, but now I wouldn't say get a cheap drone, because it might not fly you all that well. And again, you get what you pay for. And with the collision avoidance systems that you have now, again, you have to be prepared to, throw it all away. It's like walking up to the roulette table. It's one big bad break can break you. But that's less of a concern today.
So the holiday season is coming up here shortly. If you had a checklist that you might offer some of the folks on the phone who might be interested in getting into drone photography, what would your short list be? I mean, would it be the camera, having a dual camera? Would it be power? What would some of the things that they should look for?
Well, again, it depends. You get what you pay for. If Santa can afford a 2-camera drone such as this Air 3, get that in the Fly More combo, because it'll come with 2 more batteries. Get what you can afford, and what your intended use is going to be. The Air 3 has a pretty good camera. Well, there's 2 of them. There's the wide angle and the moderate telephoto. Whereas if you're using like a mini, I think are up to a mini 4 now. You only have the 1 camera, but it's so much easier to pack. If you're one who likes to travel, you can throw that, fold it up, and almost put it in a pocket, but you could easily put it in a carry-on or checked in your luggage.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again. Once again, thank you so much for all of the words of wisdom and the wonderful pictures that you showed us. This has been truly really remarkable. I've learned a lot, and I hope that you all who have watched this really enjoy it. And
Thanks
happy
again for having me.
Thanksgiving to everybody and happy holidays to everybody. We'll be back with our Zoom sessions in 2025. And this is Ann Mason for Garen Goldsmith and Jim Perry, your logistics team, signing off for 2025. Good night, everybody. And thanks again, Mike. This was great.
Thank you.
And thanks, everybody, for attending.